Okay.
Okay.
Welcome all of you to our online facilitation this evening on agricultural mechanization. So we've treated a number of topics so far. So the question now remains, what do you want us to discuss on?
The engines, you can go on to engines again.
Why do you want to stay on engines?
The 2-stroke and 4-strokes. I want us to go over it again. That's all, so that I can get the understanding more deeper or more easier.
More easier. What don't you understand about the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke engines? You have to tell me. Look.
I understand the 2-strokes and the 4-strokes engine. One is for IC, and the 4-stroke engine is the diesel engines, and the 2-strokes is the petrol fuel engines. Yeah, but I just want to know the cycle again. That's all. How compression and exhaust those power takes place, intake takes place.
Okay.
When air is open and the fuel, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Let's
okay.
I want first.
Okay. That's fine. So first of all, let me throw the question. So when we talk of let's deal with the 4-stroke. We talk of diesel and we talk of what? Petrol, right? That's what we normally talk of, right?
Yes, please.
Let me share the screen for you and make sure that you can see. Probably it will be easier, isn't it, to explain it for you. Can you see the screen? Can you see the screen?
Yes, Doc. Yes.
Okay, fine. So we are talking of the principles of operation of internal combustion engines, right? So both for 4-stroke and 2-stroke.
Yes.
So there's a sequence that goes on.
Yes.
And we said we have suction, which is also intake.
Yes.
Or then you have compression, where when you look at suction, you're looking at admission of air. That's when you're dealing with diesel engines, or air fuel mixture when you're dealing with the petrol engines. In your midterms, I realized that a lot of you were confusing it. Some of you were writing the two. But if the question is specific, if I'm talking of diesel, then it means I expect you to use that of the air. Okay. If it's petrol, I'm looking at the air fuel mixture thing. Okay. When it comes to the compression, it's the same thing. That's the second stage, right? Where there's a mixture inside, and then we move to the power and then the exhaust. Now, to if you are dealing with the diesel or petrol, okay, in 4-strokes, what you should see, you can still see the PowerPoints, right?
Yes, I'm opening my slides.
No, there's a slide being displayed
on my laptop.
Not on your laptop. Can you see what I'm showing? On the screen. Okay, fine. So
yes, on the main screen.
On the main screen, yeah. Can you see?
4-stroke cycle engine.
Fine. So it means you can see.
Yes, please.
Okay, so when it comes to diesel, what you should always know is that they have what? Valves. Okay. When I'm describing diesel engines, remember the valves, right? If you're dealing with the petrol, then you should be looking at the ports. Okay, they do not use valves. Another thing you should take into consideration is when you're dealing with diesel engines, you'll be dealing with what? Injectors. right? When it comes to petrol, what will you be dealing with? Petrol, what will you be dealing with? You would have to unmute yourself to talk. So when it comes to petrol, what will you deal with?
Hello, sorry, I'm coming. Diesel, petrol, I'll be dealing with there is no valve.
I mean, in diesel we use injectors, fuel injector, but in petrol, what do we use for the ignition?
We use fortunately the ignition spark plug.
Good. So you use the
Plugs.
spark plug. So it means that if the question, you have the question, and then it's dealing with diesel, and you start talking about spark plugs, and already you are off, right? You are off.
Yes.
So what we see is that you have the valves, okay? They open and then they close, okay? Now, when you look at the operation, what's happening, during the suction or intake stroke for diesel engines, what happens is that you see the piston moves downwards, right? But what moves is only air, that is when you are dealing with diesel, or a mixture of air and fuel when you're dealing with what? Petrol. Okay.
A mixture of
air and fuel, that would be petrol. Okay. That would move in, right? So your piston. Okay. So what happens is, in this stage, there are two valves, the intake valve and the exhaust valve. What's happening is that the exhaust valve is closed in the suction stage, but the intake valve is opened to allow in the air or air fuel mixture into the cylinder, right? So now this pushes the piston downwards. And so we know that the crankshaft still keeps on rotating, okay? Joined to the flywheel, right? So there's pressure in the engine cylinder, okay? But it's less than the atmospheric pressure during this stroke, okay? Now, what happens is, in the next stage, now compression, when you want to compress something, always it means you want to build pressure. So that's why I was talking about, if you take like a wine bottle, if you really want it to gush out, or when you want to pop it, you want it to really flow, then you shake and keep on shaking, right? Then you build up pressure in before you pop it. But so in the compression stage, what is happening is that the piston now is moving what? Upwards. Now, what happens is both valves are now closed. So because both valves are now closed, pressure builds up in there. So either the fuel in there, the mixture of air fuel is compressed in the cylinder. In the case of petrol engines, and this is ignited by a spark plug when it comes to petrol. But when it comes to the diesel engines, this ignition is done by what? An injector, right? Now, as the pressure builds up in this stage, it means that it's like you atomize, when something is atomized, it becomes like like shower. It's like when you take water and you shake it, it's like you're reducing its thickness into finer particles. So like when you take a sprinkler, you see how the water gushes out from the sprinkler. That is that kind of idea that you are looking at over here. So at the compression stage, pressure builds up in the cylinder, but both valves are closed. Then you move to the power. So that is where ignition of the fuel is going to take place. There's tremendous amount of heat generated in that cylinder, ready for ignition. Now what's happening is you realize that the piston is moving downwards again, right? In the power stroke, it goes downwards again. Then the connecting rod will transmit the power from the piston to the crankshaft, and then it rotates. Okay. At this point, mechanical work can be done. Ready. It's like once your car has ignited, right? It means that, or the tractor, you can start moving, right? So it means that work can be done. You can start moving. It can be hitched to any implement, and then you start dragging it. That is what is happening. Then as you work, the fuel is burning. So as it's burning, the part that is not needed, that's the which will be the exhaust, the unused part, okay? The used part will then come out as smoke through the exhaust, okay? At that stage, what happens is the inlet valve will be closed, but the exhaust valve will be open to allow the burnt fuel, okay, to go out. That's the gases. Okay, that's why you get that at the exhaust stage. All this action is happening quickly because once you get into a car or a tractor or whatever, all you know is once you ignite, it starts. But all you should know is all these actions for stroke are already taking place from the fuel that's in the tank or to the compression to the ignition. So you realize that if maybe you had problems with your spark plugs, when you start your car, you realize that it will not. It will start making that kind of noise that we normally hear. And then you might go and open the engine to check what's happening. And if there's no fuel in the car, then you should understand that the car is not going to start. So it means that your first stage, maybe it's not going to work because there's no fuel in there for you to even get to the compression stage. So these are all that is happening inside. So all you need to understand about the four is that in a diesel engine, you are using injectors. In a petrol engine, you're using spark plugs, but you're using air fuel mixture in a petrol, the air comes in a diesel. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, and for the diesel engines, you realize that, or for the four strokes, realize that all these are happening individually in each cylinder, right? But when we move to the two-stroke, that is why a four-wheel, when it comes to the four wheels, they are more effective. Okay, the four strokes, they are more effective because of what's happening in there. Now, when you come to the two strokes engine, let's take the petrol. We are not using a valve, we are using ports. Okay, it's the same thing again, the suction, compression, power, exhaust. Okay, but we did say something about what is happening inside. It will take what's the name? The number of revolutions that would happen in that of a two-stroke, right, is faster than that in a four-stroke engine, right? This will do the revolution. But the problem we have with the two-stroke is we said was scavenging. It's not efficient. So instead of using a high percentage of the fuel for work, most of them is not used for work as compared to the four-stroke. That's why the two-stroke ideally should have been better, but it's not. Okay. So in this, there's no valve. Yeah. So the movement takes place through the holes. So if you realize, this is the port that you have. So fuel mixture is drawn into the crankcase. Well, at this point, you see, when you look at where the exhaust port is, you see it's a bit higher than the transport port, right? So at this point, when the cylinder is up, you realize that it's closing both ports. What you should realize is when it comes to the diesel engines, the petrol, the two-stroke cycle engine, the two events, suction and compression, are happening at the same time inside, and then you have the power and exhaust also happening in the next stage. Okay, so here, you are having both suction and compression taking place here. And just when the compression is ending is when ignition starts here. And then at this stage, what is happening here is the power and exhaust happening, which will take place here. And that's why at this stage, that's where the piston moves down. But initially, the fuel mixture is drawn into this. These are open, realize this goes into the transport valve. And then there's compression that builds up in here before the piston really comes down. So this is the case with the two-stroke engine. Okay. Now, what's happening is when the piston moves upwards, it covers the two ports, as you can see. And the transport port, which is normally almost opposite, they are opposite each other, the transport and the exhaust ports, they are opposite, right? So this traps the charge of air-fuel mixture inside here, already drawn from the open valve into the cylinder. Now, further upward movement of the piston compresses it. So there's that compression in there, and this uncovers the suction ports. Now, fresh air is drawn in through this port into the, this is a cycle that will keep on happening. Now, just before the end of the stroke, the mixture of the cylinder, so now compression is going on, suction has taken compression. Just before it ends, ignition will take place by the spark plug. Remember, it's a two-stroke, so it's not an injector. It is a plug that's going to happen, be used. Okay. Then burning of the fuel would rise. But as the fuel is burning, means temperature and pressure is going to build up, okay? And this will force now the piston downwards. By forcing it downwards, what happens is that you realize that this port here, right, will be opened, okay? Once the exhaust port is open, it means that the burnt fuel, the gases that you do not need, is the one that is going to escape. Burnt fuel is pushed out from it. That's what happens over there, okay? And then now the cycle will keep on repeating itself over and over again. That's just in the two-stroke cycle engine. So once you have a question and dealing with two-stroke cycle engine, and you start talking about valves, already you are off, okay? And then when you start talking also about injectors, you're already off, okay? Okay. You might be able to describe the procedure very well, but the examiner or the one marking would have to be, would consider you and give you some marks for what you've done. But if you start on the right tangent, then you get a full mark. So most of you would realize when I marked, instead of the full 8, some were getting 4, some were getting 5, depending on what they wrote in the text. Ideally, if like I said, I wanted to go by it, maybe I would have even marked it wrong already from the beginning. So that is it when it comes to the two-stroke and then the 4-stroke engines. Okay. Is there something else you want us to discuss?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Maybe. I'm fine.
You are fine.
Yes, please.
What else do you want us to talk about? We have time.
So I want to ask a question. You said the revolution in the 2-stroke is faster than that of in the 4-stroke. Does it mean that in the 2-stroke it's shorter than in the 4-stroke?
Yeah, it takes shorter time to complete the cycle, the suction to the exhaust, but it's not efficient because the fuel is not effectively used. We did talk about diesel engines have much more efficiency, fuel use efficiency than petrol. So although, and that's why we talked about scavenging, okay? So instead of effectively using the fuel, realize that maybe 40% of it will not be used in the 2-stroke. So that's really, you are really wasting the fuel. Okay, it's not really effectively being used in doing the work that you are supposed to deal with it. That's why diesel engines are much preferred. Whereas the tractors, all those systems, the big trucks will use a diesel engine because of the efficiency of the fuel of diesel engines. And no one wants to use petrol. Even the pool is better with diesel engines. So, and ideally, most of the 4-wheel drives outside have been designed with diesel engines. Diesel is cheaper in terms of fuel. It's Ghana here have realized that diesel is much more expensive than petrol. Yeah. So, and the engines are heavier. It's more complicated when it comes to the diesel engine. The design, everything about the diesel engines are different. Okay. But maintenance of a diesel engine, it's lower than a petrol engine. It takes a longer time to maintain it as compared to the petrol. changing the parts in a petrol engine is fast. You spend much more money in maintaining it than a diesel engine. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
What else? Mhm. What else do you want us to talk about? Or questions? Because we are having a facilitation. So this is free tutorials. So you are free to ask questions. Otherwise, as far as next week is your last lectures, and